The situation across West Asia, extremely explosive. Even as we speak, Israel has warned Iran of a very strong response. Israel has said, and I want to quote, "We will respond. We know how to locate important targets. We know how to strike with precision and power." Words of Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi at the Tel Aviv Air Base. Israel insists they can target any place across West Asia, across Middle East, and soon their enemies will understand that. The Chief of General Staff was visiting airmen at the Tel Aviv Air Base targeted by Iranian missiles. He said IDF soldiers will mark this holiday season in the Gaza Strip, in Lebanon, in Judea, in Samaria, and all along the borders with reinforced forces and heightened state of readiness, and that the Israeli Defense Forces know this holiday is not complete without hostages. I'll get you much more on the latest developments, but first, listen in to the Israeli Chief of Defense Staff.
We have the ability to reach and attack any point in the Middle East, and those of our enemies who have not understood this until now will understand it soon. We know that the holiday is not complete without the abductees. We are obliged to continue and do everything to return them, and we grieve for the voids that have fallen.
And the images that you see on your television screen in the past 24 hours, the skies in Israel, it lit up a barrage of nearly 200 ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles fired from Iran, launched from Iran. Now, so far, Iran hadn't launched this massive a direct attack, but the suspense over when Israel will strike back, that's the biggest question the world is asking today. Iran has officially entered this conflict, but the big takeaway from the escalation was Iran can strike deep inside Israel. The question is, despite the Iron Dome, the David Sling, the Arrow 2, the Arrow 3, the Patriot missile defense shield, and of course the fighter jets of the Israeli Air Force, the US Air Force, the US Navy destroyers in the Mediterranean Gulf, at least some of these hypersonic missiles and cruise missiles and ballistic missiles were able to hit areas in and around Tel Aviv. Much more on that big story, but first, these latest developments.
Like fireworks in a night sky, salvos of Iranian ballistic missiles painting a surreal canvas in the dark airspace over Israel. Missiles in their hundreds soaring into the air, each dot of light representing thruster flames, propelling a warhead towards a target. Images that have viraled around the world, becoming the face of this latest escalation in a crisis that's just shy of a year old. Iran, which has large arsenals of ballistic missiles, had held back from any direct attack until the night of October 1st, when dozens of these missiles, Imad, Ghadar and Fatah 2 missiles, attempted to hit multiple targets across the country. The attack even involved the first use of a hypersonic version of Iran's Fatah 2 missile. Iran claimed that these streaks of light hit most of their targets. With Iranian reports even suggesting that the missiles managed to destroy large numbers of Israeli combat aircraft. A claim not proven with evidence thus far. The haunting lights in the darkness, a message to Israel from Iran. A message that Iran not only has the ability to strike, but the ability to strike specific targets. Israel's air defense systems, including the Iron Dome, did manage to intercept several of the incoming missiles. with almost certain help from United States air defense assets situated in the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. But the sheer number of missiles launched together meant that at least some of the missiles managed to evade interception and hit their targets. The unending stream of imagery of the missiles in flight painted across the night sky won't be forgotten soon and will thicken the clouds that now darken between the two countries. Bureau Report, India Today.
So after close to 181 missiles were fired, including the hypersonic missiles, the ballistic missiles, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps generals have claimed significant damage has been inflicted on key military installations, and each target was very carefully chosen. For example, the Mossad headquarters, and Mossad has been blamed for those pager attacks and for providing pinpoint intelligence that led to the killing not just of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran but also Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon. So Mossad headquarters was in the line of fire, as were 3 key air bases in Israel where fighter jets were launched to target Lebanon. Now, as the world watches very closely, the question is, when will Israel respond? It's not if, but when and how.
Ballistic missiles tearing through the night sky. West Asia is in turmoil as nearly 200 missiles were fired by Iran into Israel. Iran's ballistic missile attack on Israel has caused significant damage, claims the Iran Revolutionary Guards. Operation True Promise 2 targeted 3 key Israeli air bases, namely Nevatim, Hatzerim and Tel Aviv. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard stated that F-35 and F-15 fighter jets used in the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah were targeted. Iran also claimed that the Mossad headquarters was targeted in the precision strikes. The big question now is, how will Israel respond to attacks by Iran? Scenario 1. Israel may strike high-value targets like Iran's Tar Allah headquarters and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Command. Scenario 2. Israel could carry out airstrikes on Iran's underground missile bases. Scenario 3. Israel may carry out missile strikes on Iranian air bases. Scenario 4. Airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. Scenario 5. Targeted covert assassination of Iranian politicians. Scenario 6. Mossad covert killings of Iranian diplomats or intel officers abroad. And lastly, Scenario 7. Israel could target Iranian assets in Lebanon, Yemen and Syria. As tensions in the Middle East escalate, global concerns grow with World War III warnings from Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. The US has deployed additional troops and more fighter jets to the Middle East as an attempt to mitigate the conflict between Israel and Iran's proxies from becoming a regional war. Bureau Report, India Today.
Let me get you more on this big developing story. Joining me from Tel Aviv is Nick Kolyohin, and Nick has been traveling very extensively, especially in the last 24 hours. Also, Anjana Sankar is a senior journalist with the National in Abu Dhabi, tracking these developments very closely. Nick, 24 hours later, what's the battle damage assessment? What's been the impact of the Iranian missile strikes, sir?
So although the Iranians said that they targeted the bases of the Israeli army, actually I saw how Israelis all across Israel were running to the bomb shelters and how the rockets were targeting schools, buildings of regular citizens, streets of Israel, restaurants and the shopping mall centers. So most of the rockets that I saw, the debris of them and the damage was in a civilian population. And by a lot of luck, one of the rockets didn't kill hundreds of children, because it was the ceremony of the Rosh Hashanah, the new year of the Jewish people. And just 3 hours after, the ballistic rocket of Iran hit the school at Gadera, south to Tel Aviv, and it destroyed part of the school. And fortunately, there were no children there. And also, I saw about 100 houses that suffered from the blast of one of the rockets at the town of Hod HaSharon, north to Tel Aviv. Also there were no casualties, but it is because Israel has a really strong air defense, the Iron Dome, and also other systems that intercepted most of the rockets, and the ones that hit the ground, most of them hit in open areas, because the system can calculate which of the rockets
also bring
they
in
are
Anjana
shutting
into this
down
conversation.
and which
Anjana,
not.
both the US and Israel called the missile strike a failure. But was Iran actually, in your appreciation, targeting these bases, or was it sending a message that if it wants, it can target the Mossad headquarters or the air bases, or was it indeed a failure?
Thank you for having me. I don't think this time Iran was just sending a message. We can say that in April, when Iran had the first volley of attacks, that was sending a message, because they warned Israel 72 hours before that there will be a strike in retaliation, and they did. So it was more like a spectacle playing out, and Israel had all the time to operate its air defense, and it was sending a message. But this time around, it was clearly Iran giving a message that they can strike deep into Israel, and so far the restraint that they have exercised, throughout the Israel's aggression that we have seen, taking out the head of
Ismail Haniyeh and Nasrallah.
Ismail Haniyeh, and also Hezbollah chief. So this retaliation Iran is sending a message that we are ready to have a face-to-face encounter with Israel. So that was not a message.
So when two powerful countries face off, Iran on one side and both sworn enemies, one Iran, the other Israel, Nick, what is Israel's response expected to be? Will it target the oil infrastructure? Will it target the command and control structure or leadership in Iran? Or, as some argue, including your former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, once in a 50-year opportunity, go for the nuclear infrastructure. What is Israel likely to do?
Israel for many years, Israel sees that the nuclear bomb that Iran is striving to develop as an existential threat to the Jewish state. And this is the real threat to Israel. And that's why I believe if Israel will do something, if Israel will choose to strike Iran directly, it probably will be the nuclear facilities, because now Israel has some kind of international support, and now this is the time for them maybe to try and destroy the nuclear facilities of Iran, but it will not be so easy, because some of them are underground and they are well protected, and this target
and they're so
is not
spread
easy.
out across
But I believe if Israel will do
Iran,
something,
it's not in any one place. I mean, it's Isfahan and in several other parts of the country. But Anjana, in your appreciation, given that US and Israel are seen to be on the same page, will they be on the same page in case Israel were truly to target the nuclear infrastructure? Or will it bring actually a bigger barrage of missiles and hypersonic missiles that will really be extremely devastating for the region?
See, that is what exactly Iran has threatened, saying that if Israel retaliates, there will definitely be another barrage of attacks, which will be bigger than what we saw yesterday. But, when it comes to the U.S. stand, from the very beginning of the war, though the U.S. government officials, diplomats have consistently relayed the message that they are batting for a ceasefire. But one message is very clear from the US side, that its support for Israel is ironclad. So I think Israel now directly under fire from Iran with this brazen attack. I think Israel, not just the US, but even the other allies in Europe will be definitely giving their ironclad support to Israel, and again reiterate the message that Israel has the right to self-defend.
Okay, but does that right to self-defense include taking out nuclear infrastructure? And Nick, if you were to look at the way the missile strikes happened yesterday, despite the Iron Dome, and you're saying that you have a brilliant missile defense shield, but despite the Iron Dome, despite the David Sling, despite Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 and the Patriot system, and the fighter jets, and US support, and US Navy destroyers, some of these hypersonic missiles and the ballistic missiles, they fell near the Tel Aviv base, they fell near the Mossad headquarters, and just about a couple of 100 feet from the Mossad headquarters. The next attack could be worse.
Of course, it could be worse, but Israeli army said that as much as they know, Iran doesn't have hypersonic missiles, and they definitely didn't shoot those ones. And I didn't
the
saw
Fatah one that they claimed to
any
have fired
evidence.
yesterday?
They say, according to the Israeli army, just ballistic missiles were fired at Israel. And it's really not good, but not hypersonic. And there's no evidence that one of the rockets hit next to the Mossad headquarters. I didn't saw any evidence of that. I saw that they hit a school and some buildings in Israel and open field and civilian places. But Israeli military said that some of the missiles, they confirmed today actually to me, that some of the missiles they targeted and they hit some of the management buildings inside of Air Force bases of Israeli army, but there were no damage to jets as Iran climbing, and no damage to ammunition or some strategic facilities, just to the management buildings, and no casualties, no injuries of Israeli soldiers.
Okay. Anjana, apart from countries like perhaps Syria or Yemen or perhaps even Iraq, is there any country that's likely to stand with Iran if its infrastructure is targeted, whether it's the oil infrastructure, the command and control structure, the leadership, or the nuclear infrastructure, if it's targeted? Will any country stand with Iran? You know, in the region, what is the Russian role seen as?
See, that is the biggest fear.
Go on. Sorry, Nick, this was for Anjana.
Yeah, this is the biggest fear when we talk about total escalation of this war blowing out into a big regional war, and even the talk about whether we are on the brink of a World War III. Because if Israel retaliates against Iran and all the possibilities that you just played out, we don't know. It is a wait and watch game. But you know, this is what everybody's fear is, whether the US will be dragged into this war. US has made it very clear that during this attack, they helped Israel in its air defense. But if there is a next volley of attack, next barrage of missiles coming into Israel, if the US will get involved, other militias in the region have already warned the US that not to get involved in this war. And if they do, US targets in the Middle East will be targeted by these militias. So if that Iran comes into picture, and then it's something that we have to wait and watch, whether countries like Russia, China, and other Iran allies, what will be their move. And that is the biggest fear. And that is why there is a huge diplomatic maneuver happening now to de-escalate and to take the country out brink of war.
Nick, every war has an aim. In this conflict, after the strike by Iran, what is Israel's end game? Is it a regime change in Iran? Is it to ensure that they're no longer a nuclear weapon threat that they could well be if their nuclear infrastructure is not targeted according to Israel? What's the end game? What's the aim?
Israel has one end game from the beginning, the establishment of the country in 48. It just wanted a safe place for the Jewish people after the Holocaust. But the Arab countries, the neighbors, they never accepted Israel as a state, and they, from the first day, tried to destroy Israel. Actually, back then, USSR and Stalin helped to Israel survive this war, and they gave them ammunition and weapons. And since then, the Arab countries constantly tried to destroy Israel. And after that, Palestinians, and after that, all those militias and terror organizations as Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Iran as well. And the Jewish people, Israel, just want to live in peace. And unfortunately, this cycle of violence is not ending. And the more blood you have, the more blood will be in the future. And there is a lot of hate, and from day to day, it's becoming worse and worse. And that's why I'm afraid that
the road ahead is clearly not
easy.
Nick and Anjana, for joining me here on this India Today special. Many thanks. News also coming in. Israel has lost 7 soldiers, including one young army captain in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon. As they moved in, there was a targeted attack, and 7 Israeli soldiers have been killed in action. So the road ahead for Israel, extremely, extremely dangerous. And we'll be tracking that story very closely.